Welcome to the Polymaticast, episode 8 for January 15th, 2017. Today's topic, 3D printing. Hi, John.
Hi, Alan.
How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good.
So how's the weather over there? Is it doing okay?
Snow. Actual snow. We haven't had that in years. It's actual
Really?
snow. Yeah.
So there is definitely snow in places in the U.S. that's not normal, like Texas. Typically, I don't think it snows much there. But here in Pennsylvania, we haven't had very much. It was warm the other day, actually, on Thursday, and it was dark out. So it's weird.
So we've been having a snowstorm, and basically we have waterworks here in Holland where they can close off certain rivers, so no high tide can come in because most of the Netherlands is below sea level. So we're just one dike breach away from certain death. But they can close them. But there was a giant storm, and they closed most of them up because of it's a specific kind of storm that happens over the North Sea, and they'll flood most of the Netherlands if there weren't like stuff in place. So and it's gonna be very, very cold the next couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's not cold yet, and I'm okay with that. We're entering into spring territory. But anyhow, so we're going to talk about what 3D printers today, or you're going to talk about 3D printers. So where do we start? What do we need to know?
Well, there's lots of different kinds of 3D printers out there. Mm-hmm. There's different types of ways to 3D print. There's stereolithography, which basically uses
Is that the one that is like the resin where it sort of flashes light and then sort of cures the plastic as it goes?
That's DLP. That's digital light processing. It basically uses a projector against a flat surface of light. I think stereolithography is the one with the lasers.
Okay, so what I understood the way that worked, and I might be getting it wrong, but there would be basically a pool of resin, and the printing would happen either from the top or from the bottom of the bed, and it would cure it, and then they would basically build the 3D printing part or whatever it is from the bottom up, instead of the wave. Yeah,
so they have a piece of glass that's very close to the bottom of the pool of resin, and then there's a laser that scribes on top of that to make the tiny lines where the resin will cure. There's like different types of processes with that, and there is a way to do it with a projector too. So that's DLP. This is basically the same idea: light sensitive resins that will build something up. But most of the normal printers you have today, like the Ultimaker, MakerBots, that's all fused deposition modeling, so FDM. Basically just a hot glue gun squirting some plastic on a piece of whatever, and then building that up from the bottom up.
Right. And
there's some other ones, like selective laser sintering, which is basically just a laser going over some powder that will just heat up the plastic powder and turn it into a whatever you want it to print. And then there's some other ones, but they're not really useful for people at home. For the most part, you'll probably have an FDM printer. If you're buying a 3D printer, most of them are FDMs. They just squirt the plastic on, and that's how most of the stuff works. You buy the plastic in rolls.
Right, yeah. So what are most of these? So, I mean, there's different material types, right? And depending on the material type and obviously depending on the printing mechanism, right? So we were talking about SLA and these various other ones, or the way it does the printing, what air quotes around that. So they all have different uses and are optimized or tuned for different applications. Like, for example, where I understood the SLA, or I guess now DLP, I think is what probably newer. Like this technology isn't new. This has been around for years before the wave of MakerBot and the company. And so what I understood, like the way SLA would be used for, would be in huge cases where there's like an MIT or where they wanted to print out like a basic huge structure model of like a car or something to see the sizing or the fitting, they would use that, right? So like I understand each of them have different application structures and all of them have different quality levels, right? Like the SLA, right, is like real fine. It's like
Yeah.
almost finished part, right, work.
The SLA layer height of those prints are very tiny, so that you can print very fine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And DLP, same
Got it.
thing. You can just print a very thin layer. For FDM, there is a limit to the amount of height you can achieve. So I think the smallest right now is 50 micron. So
Right,
that's
yeah.
0.05 millimeters. So there's my printer, the lowest it goes is 100 microns. So it's 0.1 millimeters. I don't know what size that is in inches, but it's very, very thin.
It's been really interesting depending on the material type. Like, so you're now getting, and I don't know if this is quality stuff, but where they have food printers will print you chocolates, and then it's neat that they print them, but then you bite into the chocolate and it's not the best. It's not Godiva. It's not. You can't just like Get Back to the Future, put a pill in and then 3D print you a turkey with all the trimmings. Like it doesn't work that way.
Well, if you look at when we went to Google I/O for the first time, that was 2010, I think.
2009, I think,
No,
because you were the year before it was public.
No. 2008 is when I went for the first time.
Okay.
2009,
Okay.
a colleague of mine went with me. I think 2010 is the one where you were there.
Yeah, I was there, I think, for 11 and 10. No, 9 and 10, I think.
Anyway, when we were there the first time, we saw Brie Pettis with his cupcake
Yeah.
printer.
I saw him walk by.
So that's a nice. No, we went to his booth, but the printing materials that like chocolate and stuff like that's been around for years. That's actually easier to do because it's thicker. You don't have to do anything special with it. You can print in thicker layers. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if it looks really bad, because it's just going to be eaten anyway. But you're not actually producing the food, right? You're just squirting it out in the form you printed it. You got it in. There's nothing. You're not really making food.
Right. I think most of those cases were for things like where they could be molded. So if you're a caterer and you want to make things for Jim and Wendy's wedding, you would make little hearts with Jim and Wendy, built into it. Like that's what people are using it for. They're not using it for anything that they couldn't mold. It's just that they can make one thing in the computer and produce 500 of the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And but the point was talking about like the material types. Like there's different kinds of types, right, which have different kinds of plastics, and in FDM there's a whole range of that, right? So
for the stereolithography and DLP, there's usually a resin that cures with certain light types. So some of them use UV, some of them use normal light. The problem with those are that they wear out pretty fast as soon as even though they're cured, even though you put them in the light, they'll still start to keep curing and keep getting harder, and eventually they'll start crumbling. So that's not as good. For FDM printers, there's a host of different types of materials, and then you can buy them for a kilo for like $20. There is PLA, which is cornstarch based. There's ABS, which is oil based. There's PETG, which is basically what your water bottles and soda bottles and stuff are made out of. There's HIPS, which is water dissolvable. There's PVA, is also water dissolvable. You can even print with nylon. You can print with a flexible filament called TPU. There's all sorts of different types of things, and then there's mixes of them. There's PLA with carbon fiber inside of it. There's PLA with iron or copper or bronze or all sorts of different types of things. And wood. You can print wood. It even smells like burnt wood. It's really good.
That's kind of cool. I'm glad there's such a community for this stuff, and you have to thank Brie Pettis and his company, at least, for making it mainstream
Yeah.
and doing something that got enough attention, whether you agree with how great MakerBot was or how great Brie Pettis is, or however that works out for you, in your opinion about it. But at the very least, it's like the same thing with like smartphones. Yeah, they were around a lot longer than Apple and iPhones kind of getting involved, but by way of their popularity, a whole lot of good stuff came out of it, and we have a much larger universe. So, it's hard for me to have an argument about it. I think these are positive waves forward.
Well, with the same way that Apple did it for smartphones, it's the same way that MakerBot did it for 3D printers. They got it mainstream, although not really that mainstream yet. But it's getting to a point where I know more people now that have printers at home or want to get a 3D printer.
Right.
Right. We got one at the office for some reason, mainly because I put it there.
Yeah, you had a look on your face that I had the same kind of response. Like, why would that make any sense? You guys, it's not like what would you use that for?
Well, there's also in the company I work for, we usually have some sort of maker thing going on, so it's
right. Okay.
It makes more sense.
That's more of a. I think that sounds like more of a fun thing than it is like a useful thing. Now, I mean, I work for a company and they have warehouses and they have branches, and yeah, maybe there would be some usefulness because of a warehouse operation, but you would need somebody who is capable of doing whatever it takes regarding that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like someone who has the skills to come in and say, "Oh, you need this kind of part for that, just so that the rack doesn't fall." Okay, whip it up, and then 12 hours later, here's the part. But most places don't have an employed person who can do that.
Well, most of them have a hobbyist somewhere.
Right.
That's a good start anyway. Most people don't understand how helpful these things are. Like at first, when I got it, I printed a few Pokemon and tiny little doodads and things. That was on my first printer. But the more I got it, the more I started making my own designs. It's like a tool to make your whatever you think up a reality. You can build. There's people that build hands for handicapped people who don't have hands anymore. They build it in America, and then on the other side of the world in Africa, somebody's printing it for somebody who lost his hand. And they are iterating new different designs and everything. And it's not just disabled people's hands that they're printing, but there's like clips and things and brackets for something that broke off in your fridge, or tiny parts from IKEA furniture that's gone missing or whatever. You could just usually find the designs online and just print it, and you're done. And you can fix your home with your own printer, and that's pretty amazing.
I definitely think someone so I've always had those thoughts, and I had them a lot longer, so maybe I've given up, or I just go to Amazon to find the part. But like in my universe of things, I go, if I just had the thing that did that and that, then I could connect this thing up this way and use all this stuff, and I don't have to buy a $500 piece of something to, with a new light. Like I can make my little thing just work. And I've had that thought. And so that's great. Having that thought is great. And then wanting it is great. And then going through a little bit of work to get there is great. Most people go to their Home Depot. They go to their local store. They go on Amazon. They find the exact thing they're looking for eventually. And then a couple days later it shows up milled out of aluminum or wood or plastic, but someone has to go through the effort of designing the thing. And so and then a lot of what happens is, the advantage is if you have if you will go through the diligence, or you have the gumption to do it yourself, and you have a 3D printer, then you can go figure out how to design it, or go look on Thingiverse, or look in a common repository where someone maybe made the part for you. So, I mean, it goes from being like useless little replicator things, which were cool, to maybe, something that actually is useful for somebody who lost an arm or a hand.
Well, I think that the whole reachability of these things, like Thingiverse, like people who don't have a 3D printer don't know about Thingiverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing about Thingiverse is you can also just take out a piece and send it to a Maker Hub or 3D Hubs, I think that the website is called, and they have like people with printers at home that can print you the part for like maybe a few more dollars than it's supposed to cost, but you can get your part at home like in a day or maybe two. Right? It doesn't cost that much to have things printed by somebody else. Just have the shipping, right? And I think that having not to throw away a perfectly good piece of tech like a TV or get a new remote because the clip on the bottom lets the batteries go out all the time, right? If you can just fix it with a piece of printed part, that saves a lot of resources. And I think that mostly for repair stuff, 3D printers are very good. For new design, rapid prototyping, they're also very good.
What I was looking for is I can't find the site. I thought it was like Shaperverse or something. But
Shapeways.
there is sort of like before Etsy got into 3D printing things, there was like a 3D printing where they had the professional machines.
It's called Shapeways.
Shapeways?
Yep.
Yeah. Where you could put your fancy piece of art or your, golden replicator pieces, and they'll mill it out of aluminum or whatever it is, and you buy it through the marketplace.
That's the they use the selective laser sintering. So they have the powder, and they print with the laser on top of the plastic. They basically just melt it with the laser, and they do the same thing with the World of Warcraft figures. So you can have your World of Warcraft character, you can have it printed like with your favorite armor on and that kind of stuff. It's nice. It's nice they do it, but it's very expensive.
Yeah, it is. And you, even if you were one year I was looking at that site for like gifts for other people to order things that I thought they might like that as a gift. I never did, but I did bookmark a whole bunch of things I thought people would really like. So that's kind of cool. But what's the I'm more curious. I didn't know about the sort of the open kind of market where I guess there's sites that allow you to ask for someone to 3D print you something, and then
I think the website is called 3D Hubs.
Okay.
Yeah, 3D Hubs is the one I was hooked up to for a while. I haven't done anything for them. I was looking for somebody to print parts of a 3D printer, and then I could build my own. But eventually, I just bought one. But 3D Hubs is reportedly very good for this. Your mileage may vary depending on the person you decide to go and print with, because you can select the person that's closest to you. So maybe somebody in your area has a 3D printer, and you can just use them to print your stuff. But they might choose like really cheap filament, or the wrong filament, or not finish it for you, or have like stuff attached to it, not clean it up, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, your mileage will vary depending on. It's kind of a neat site. I got to be honest. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. So if you want something printed, just go there and you can have something printed. Even parts for a printer. There's some open source printers you can get parts for. You just send them to the person, print this, and you'll get your things in the mail, and you can start building your own printer. Kind of brings me to the other points. You can have different types of printers in the FDM market. So, which is the most mainstream used 3D printers? Like, you can have a Cartesian printer, or you can have a Delta printer. So, the Cartesian, they work kind of like a CNC machine. So, they have an X, a Y, and a Z axis where the head moves over and squirts down the plastic. And then there's deltas, which have 3 pylons on which there's a thing, a little rail that uses arms to move the center where the extruder is. So you push the plastic down to that, and then the arms move independently of each other to put extruder close to the bed, and then print. That's a different type of printing than Cartesian. It's very hard to align these things, the deltas. I have 2. I have yet to finish the second one. The first one is finished, but the alignment is still off and getting kind of tired of it. But I also have a Cartesian printer, and they are awesome because they work. They work out of the box most of the time, anyway. But there's a question in there: do you build it yourself or do you buy a prefab? So prefabs, they're great. You can get it out of the box and start printing within like an hour or so, maybe even less. But if it breaks down, you didn't build it, so it's harder to understand how to fix it. And it's not easy to improve it, as easy as it is with a kit. But the other side of that is that even though they're cheaper and they, you can expand upon them and all sorts of other stuff, they can be very frustrating. I spent hours and hours playing with my Castle Mini to get it to at least extrude, right? I've had...
Yeah, I can understand that. It's the same thing like with building PCs or whatever. Like, okay, so building a PC costs more nowadays than it would be to go over to your local, around here in the U.S., like a Best Buy or some kind of, electronics store, common grand electronics store, and go buy a PC and just pay for it and be done with it. You can build these things, you can do this stuff, but you have to have some knowledge that goes along with it. And in this case, this is physical skill that's also involved. This is engineering physical skill, not just like work you've thought out in a computer. Like you actually have to go and figure out, you have to have some handyman skills or handywoman skills, right? And if you are just clumsy that way, where you couldn't even, do 5 different kinds of knots and understand how that works, then maybe this is probably not the first step forward for, buying a prefab. Is probably a good starting point.
What? It's a good...
But it'll cost you something.
Well, there's like 3 different ways to get a printer, right? You can get a prefab, you can get a kit, which is all assembled. Well, not assembled, but it's got all the parts. Or you can scrounge the parts yourself. The third part is what I did with my Castle, which was the worst possible idea I could ever have, because I had to go on eBay, get the right parts, and then get the wrong parts apparently, then get some other parts. And it took me like 3 months to get the parts together because I didn't have the right screws, didn't have the right aluminum extrusion. It has a special form. You can slide screws in there. And then you have to get a specific kind because that would fit with the 3D printed parts. I already printed the parts. It took like 12 hours and I got the parts for it. But I had to get all the other components that are not plastic, and that took me a very long time. Now, getting a kit is nice because you have all the parts and they're supposed to go together. But the problem with the kits are that you might get some Chinese knockoff,
right, yeah,
and you get instructions, and the instructions they're in English, but they sound more like Moonspeak.
Like
they have
Google translated.
Yeah, and then worse, and then back to Chinese, and then back to English. That's how most of the instructions work. So finding the right instructions for your kits can be a tough one, but they are, in the end, I think having a 3D printer is better than not having one, especially with if you have kids and you want to get them into making or get them ahead of the game. Having a 3D printer and knowing stuff about how to design stuff, or having them use the sketch thing from Autodesk, like they have a tiny application for kids to design their own toys. Like, that's amazing. We couldn't have that like 5-6 years ago.
I think the technology is still reasonably in terms of consumer, marketplace. It's still very much in its infancy. And so teaching a kid how to design stuff is going to teach them visual and logical relationship skills that they will help them later in life.
Definitely.
And more importantly, it's going to teach them patience.
Oh, yes. Designing a thing and then trying to print it and then finding out it doesn't work. Yeah.
It's going to teach them patience, and it's going to teach them rejection, and it's going to teach them something pretty early on. And if you could basically burn that in, or cook that into an individual pretty early on, I think that's useful, because these are things that we struggle to evolve ourselves later in life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Would you ever get one? A 3D printer?
So for me, it's it's a matter of consumers, and I mean that by things that consume my time. So right now, I Minecraft a little bit. I Minecraft for all of like 90 an hour last night, and I kind of completed a thing I left, incomplete from like New Year's. And so maybe if I'm lucky, I'll find some room to watch some YouTube or watch some TV or watch a movie, and those are consumers of my time. And then maybe I will choose to, instead of doing that, I'll Minecraft or do something else, a consumer of my time. So if I got a 3D printer and I thought about it, and I'm more of a person, I think I would probably buy a prefab unit, and I buy one with has a lot of optionality for me, and I would ease my way into it. The thing is, most of my needs in the world, I have enough patience about myself where I can say, oh, that's the photographic clamp I want, and I want it made out of alumina. I totally screwed this up. I want it made out of aluminum, and I want it to work correctly, and I wouldn't 3D print that. I would just spend the $6 and buy that big hefty, chunk of 2 pounds of metal off of Amazon, and be patient enough to wait a week and buy it and forget it. So for me, I generally don't have a world that I live in where I see the opportunity where a 3D printer would be valuable. However, I don't have a 3D printer, and I can't enable that level of thinking. So it's not around me, and I go, oh, I could knock that out in the 3D printer. But I also know that I have a learning curve that goes in between that, which is, building and designing skills. I have them, but I don't have them in 3D. And I know there's there's Thingiverse. You can just download a thing, and then, you might be able to kind of hack your way through it and click a button and print. So for me, I'm not there yet, because I just don't foresee an average need for me to have a 3D printer yet, aside from being like a cool thing to go figure out and play with.
Yeah, but even if you don't have a 3D printer, you can still, like, if you need a certain part and you find it on Thingiverse,
Right,
instead of having to buy it on Amazon for like $20, and the part is cheaper on plastic, you can get it from like a 3D hubs.
Right.
You can have it next day, right? That could still be good.
Yeah, that could be totally useful. Yeah. I think for someone like my father, this would be great because he is more handyman world in his retirement than he is like day-to-day person. But the mountain that he can't climb is he is not competent enough in like modern computing ways where he could figure out how to do the 3D designing work himself. He's more likely to not want to go browse through Thingiverse. He'd be more likely want to, I see it's like this and it should work like this, and I can kind of hack my way around some CAD software. Yeah, maybe I'll try to make this work. And I think he'll have more failure than success. And he doesn't have someone like me who also doesn't have those skills to come in and sweep in and say, oh, no, let me teach you this, and then you'll be able to print out these custom parts that you need. I know he is a person who would totally, if he had those skills and that capability, he would absolutely figure out how to find 3D printing to fit into his world of things. So I don't know. I think from someone like my father, he doesn't have all the prerequisites to make it a useful thing for him day to day. But it would be a useful thing if that was something was easy to, if he could just buy that off of a company and it had all the parts that he wanted, or he needed a plumbing part and he could pay, $20 a year and go down and go through a plumbing catalog and find the exact piece he needed and then have it spit out in 10 hours. Then yes, this would be a useful thing, but we don't have a world that's like that. You can't go to Amazon and buy the 3D file for printing out a part and license out a part out of an Amazon 3D printer part. Like, we don't have high scale production things at home like we do like microwaves, right? Or we...
So basically what's missing is like an Amazon for 3D printer files.
Yep, everybody. And Amazon for everybody. And I don't mean just like Amazon specifically. Like if they got in that business, that would be wonderful. That you printed a custom file and just like they're sending you duct tape and potato chips and your laundry detergent and a weird photographic mount thing. And also you can add to your order this custom part for kids,
Yeah.
right? So that for with missing hands, you know, like if they had high quality, high volume level 3D printing stuff like that, if there was a marketplace like that for anyone, it makes it easy for them to find their plumbing parts. But the other thing is, you get a company who makes like Ferguson, who makes plumbing parts or whatever for very specific piping things that only plumbers can. They go through a big thin paper catalog,
Yeah.
right? And they flip through it and they find, oh, your auto part is 3299666, and they type it in. They pick up a phone. They call Napa, and Napa goes and delivers that part to them, and invoices them. But they delivered a thing that was already manufactured. So 3D printing, I think, could be really useful for things like that are all made of one material, like a plumbing part that could be easily recreated. I think it would be really useful for something like that, but you would need a marketplace and the company who designed that part to license that, to be 3D printed.
Hmm.
I mean, wouldn't it be nice for you to load up PCV kind of type of material, and then, buy the part and it spits out of your 3D printer in a couple hours? Like, that would be wonderful. But in the same respect, it's also easier to just go find your local plumbing store and say, I'm looking for this thing, and they do that sort of matchup
Yeah.
for you. So
Well, the problem with that is that because you have to have inventory, there's like mass-produced
right.
things, and
Mm-hmm.
they're in stock, and they're like in a warehouse somewhere. Right? And getting to them is going to take a long time. And I think the more we have designs out there from people, even if they're not open source, there's closed source 3D printer parts
Mm-hmm.
sites that have designs for your D&D castles and other dungeon
Right.
type stuff,
And
or
I think
or
I
parts for
think
machines or parts for furniture.
there is a company I saw on test. I don't know if you saw the same video. This is last year, or probably, I don't know, I mean, maybe possibly this time last year, where they were, I think Norm was walking through this facility where these guys had created their own 3D, very production ready, high quality 3D printing mechanisms. And they've put out like little consumer bots, nothing any real major, but their primary business is that they've created very high quality, nice production ready 3D printing things, and they print 3D printing parts that go into,
Yeah,
production products
yeah,
for big companies,
yeah,
right? They're just changing the manufacturing chain instead of, and they print on demand. But a company who is an automaker who wants this specific part, instead of going to a mill who would take 8 months to give you a volume of 1,000 of these parts, they can go call this company up and pay a slightly adjusted premium and get them in 2 weeks.
yeah. Not just that. I think in the UK they had a certain type of aircraft that they are printing parts for because
Mm-hmm.
they don't make them anymore. Right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
cars or parts of cars that you can just print. I think with the higher temperature resistant plastics like PETG and ABS, you can more easily print those. I think that PETG is going to be more likely the replacement for ABS because it's less toxic. ABS is oil based and very smelly.
Mm-hmm.
If you have PETG, you can mix it with stuff like carbon fiber and make very strong, durable parts. I think that's very valuable for companies like this, and I think we're going to see more of that. I think that if you're going to space, you're going to Mars, you can't just have everything. You can't just ship everything over there. You can make the parts out of certain plastics or other
Right. Yeah.
materials like PLA. You can grow corn on Mars in your thing and then make PLA out of that and make your thing, right?
Yeah, so there's definitely definitely in context to something like that, that's great. I had a thought about gravity, and I thought gravity would be needed in case of space, um,
No, you don't.
because
Actually,
really,
no, they went. They put a 3D printer on the ISS, and they printed
did
a
they did
wrench that they used. So
did they use some kind of like
no,
vacuum pressure or
you
something to
can
pull
use
it?
if you have a Delta, for example, a Delta printer will work
Mm-hmm.
upside down. And there is most printers will work. There was a video recently. I think it was also tested where they had a printer mounted upside down, and it was just printing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
actually works. There was concerns of that not working, but because you're squishing it against the bed and the bed is heated,
Mm-hmm.
you'll print on top of each layer, and it will just glue together because it's hot, and well,
Right, and
it
it's
will still
curing.
stick. So maybe the layer height will be a little bit different, but yeah, I think and on Mars you do have gravity, so it's not as hard as on
Right, but
Earth.
it is some form
It's like one
of
third or
force
something,
pulling.
but it's good enough. It's way more than they have on the ISS.
That is true, indeed. So, kind of wrapping up the thought, the one thing I want to just put out is like, if we get to the day of having someone built a grand marketplace where you can print out your plumbing part, or that mouse button that you broke, or your keyboard key that you broke, or whatever, things that are good for, like, I need a rubber handle for my mallet, for stuff like that. Like, when it comes to something that's infrastructure, like, plumbing, or heating valves or something like that, printing it right out of out of a 3D printer today isn't tested like the kind of parts that they ship out of a factory.
Yeah,
In theory, they've tested it, or it's of design, or it's milled out of a thing that's way more expensive than a normal person would have in their house. And so the part is not it's not production quality, even though it can fit and serve the same purpose. But what happens when there's too much pressure in your line, and then it goes kaboom? So I think there's a risk there, for things like that. And I think for some things, definitely this can be a good opportunity. I have a general thought or concern for things where there would be a marketplace for something like that, for something that is a
yeah.
critical part replacement. So,
I could see something like a shop where people have CNC mills and 3D printers and maybe molding materials and stuff like that. Like shops that actually specialize in this kind of stuff, and
yeah,
they can make you the part before somebody else can ship it to you, and maybe at a premium or maybe cheaper. So
yeah. I mean, if you had like, you go to a shopping market and you get yourself a bag of apples, if you could go ahead, like, order up your 3D custom things in your local town or city, or within like the next town over, and drive over in 15 minutes, and or the next day, like, schedule it like you do at a Genius Bar. You schedule it, you call in Monday, you schedule it for Wednesday, and you show up, and there's your part, and you buy it. Like, I think that would probably be the first step forward to building a network, or a marketplace system like this.
well, that's already happening,
Uh,
huh? If you look at the 3D hubs,
right.
that's what's happening basically. But I'm talking more about shops that are specialized in an actual, like they have a CNC mill to mill metal, right? So they mill
Mm-hmm.
aluminum. So if you need a special part for your car, you can have the manufacturer send the designs and print the part. And if more manufacturers would do that, then they would get a cut on the part, and they would get a satisfied customer because their car is fixed, right? Instead
Yeah.
of having to wait 2 weeks on the part to maybe come from China or Taiwan or whatever.
Yeah, here in the U.S., what we have is we have all these they're small little buildings. Well, they're big buildings, but they're these stores called Napa, Napa, and they have a little yellow hat thing on top of the vehicle. And what these auto parts stores do, this is how they solve the problem: is Napa bought these, like, stores every which way, which you could walk into, but likelihood all they have is a person, a couple people who are in the building that pull the inventory, and a person that delivers the part, and they charge for it. And so an auto place will call up and say, "Hey, I'm looking for Nissan 2015 this model. I need this part." And they go and they do little thing on their computer and go, "Yeah, we got 10 of them. How many do you need?" And they go, "I need one. What is that going to cost?" "Okay, great. I'll find out." And then they say, "Yes, send it over." And a guy shows up in 15 minutes because it's like a Napa is around in, between every two towns or something.
Yeah.
And so that's how like the auto part industry has like resolved itself, and it works really well for the most part. So I don't know. I mean, we just got to find a way for 3D printing fits in there in a model that's grander and more accessible to the normal person. I think that's the way to kind of build the universe of things where 3D printing is for everybody, not just for the people who know how to do it or crafty enough to know what they need. And, they know enough to be dangerous.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's one more thing, right? I got a gripe. Got a gripe about the Ono printer. That's the I think that's the DLP. That's the DLP printer.
Yeah.
I'm still looking forward to getting it at some point, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. It was supposed to ship by October, but nope, still hasn't arrived.
Well, it's a Kickstarter thing, right? So,
Well, it'll get it eventually or not.
Yeah, I mean, I have only had one thing that is at this point over a year old that I haven't received yet, and I think maybe this year, maybe in the next couple months, who knows? So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see about these things.
Yeah.
You never know.
Okay, as we speak, I think just a few minutes ago I got a tweet from Elon Musk. Oh, I just got a tweet too. I get notifications from whenever Elon Musk tweets because he's usually pretty funny.
Yeah.
So they were launching a rocket and it succeeded. They launched all the satellites. That's awesome.
Okay, cool. Very good.
Yeah.
No blowing up in the middle of the launch.
I think that's a good thing. It's a very good thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a totally good thing. Hey, look, you know what? NASA has had mistakes too, but they hadn't been all eyes watching. Like comparative for SpaceX.
Because Tesla, I'm calling it Tesla. They're SpaceX.
Yeah, I know what you meant. You meant Elon Musk and SpaceX.
Yeah. But SpaceX, they do it on purpose, right? They have their video casts. They want people to see what they're doing. I think that's also why people notice more often. I like that they're doing that. So we have an article on printing on glass on our website.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty much related to the 3D printing topic of today.
Yeah, and your package that was sent on December 9th finally surfaced here for me in the U.S., and you sent me a Pokecast ball.
And it's also printed on my my 3D printer, but it's not printed on glass.
Yeah, what was this printed on? PLA?
Yeah. This is printed in PLA, yeah. But what I meant was you have a printer bed, and on top of that there is a little plastic layer that you can print on, which will stick the print to the bed. But when you print, sometimes it gets stuck too much. Now, I've had this problem, and when you try to take it off, and then suddenly you get it off, but there's a gouge in your print bed, and there's a gouge in your finger because you went through, and it's a bit of a mess.
So the article covers on Kapton tape, right? You were showing how to treat your bed.
Well, I was printing on the normal bed, and then I switched to printing on Kapton tape on the normal bed. But it's very hard to get the tape inside the 3D printer without crinkling and have to redo it, and everything sticks to each other, and you get bubbles underneath it, and that kind of ruins the aesthetic of the smooth Kapton tape. So
you have a process here where you show in the video how to do that, or how you did it.
Yeah. So I don't remember where I saw this first, but I eventually figured out a way to get the Kapton tape on there by using dishwashing soap. So Kapton tape with dishwashing soap will make the Kapton tape not sticky anymore for a while until you get all the water out, and then it will stick really well. So that's what the article is about. You can find it at polymatic.link/1z.
Awesome.
It's
Okay,
pretty
so
cool.
we got some fun stuff.
Yeah.
So
we
what
do.
do you got? Let's go down the list.
Yeah, that's something. One topic you like very much. So there's The Expanse Season 1 recap with cats. I think the cats is very topical for you.
Okay, so I do have to watch that now. I don't think I watched that yet.
So polymatic.link/1s.
All right, I'll have to check that out.
Are you gonna watch it now?
Yeah, I bought on Amazon Video. I bought season 2, so as it comes out, as it gets released, it'll simulcast up there, so I'll be able to watch season 2.
Okay.
So I have season 1, and I saw a bunch of recaps pushed there, but I don't want to watch the recaps. I just want to watch the show. So in a couple weeks,
seen season
it'll
1, right?
start releasing.
You have seen season 1, right?
I have, yep. And
Okay.
I bought it on Amazon Videos so that I could watch it.
So this recap is really good. It's really funny. It's not too spoilery, but it's amazing. Especially Miller Cat. He's very good. Yeah.
Okay.
So polymatic.link/1s.
Okay. So in the sort of Microsoft development universe, there's an app on Windows called Fiddler, and Fiddler is basically, so like if you're talking about Windows, we do have what they call, like in Unix world they would call it Snoop, but basically things that are like network sniffers.
Yeah.
That are what like network engineers would do, and a hacker of any kind of real skill would use to watch traffic between device and whatever.
Yeah.
But when you want to focus into a certain application layer like websites and you're a web developer, or you're doing things that involve websites, someone in the Windows world created something called Fiddler. And what it does is it shims its way into whatever your local web browser is and allows you to kind of focus in on the communication traffic and what's going on. So if you're getting errors against, a customer's a partner, like a third-party vendors, or you're trying to debug something why your calls to Amazon to Google or Amazon aren't working anymore. Professionally, you use something like Fiddler, which is free, and you'd be able to clearly look at all of that noise and insight, and it'll format it into things like JSON or XML or RAW and show you all the header and the post and all the network stuff. So they've decided to create a version for Linux. So I just wanted to share that. It's a really useful tool. I've not checked out the one on Linux, but if you just look for Fiddler, you will find it on Teleric's site. They bought it. There used to be an open source thing. So you can always download it for free from them, but you can also go over to their site and look at the Linux one if that's just something of interest. Polymatic.link/1v. It's a really useful tool, and I did it last week or something. We was doing tests where it was sending phase 1 test to one of our third-party vendors, and I was able to send them the session files so that we could absolutely confirm that what we sent, what they sent back, and And so if you're doing this with, server client architecture or any kind of development, Fiddler is a great tool. I don't know if there's any equivalent of that in the Linux world in general, but this allows you to kind of focus and narrow in instead of something like Wireshark, which is meant for all data, right?
Yeah.
All the busyness your OS does, despite whether your web application, how it works. So.
Yeah. Well, Fiddler is basically just a proxy server, right?
Yeah, that's correct. But it can also do, if you enable it, will decode the SSL for you too.
Okay.
So you can go and look at, again, you gotta authorize it. And what I did the other day is I didn't focus in all the things. I focused only in on the endpoint I wanted to focus on.
Yeah.
And I did that, and it showed me just the conversational pieces and sessions regarding it.
Yeah, if you're using Chrome or Firefox, you have a good developer toolbox for that kind of stuff.
But that's true.
If you're
but
looking
if you
at
get
IE,
errors, Well, if you go into like Chrome, you get errors. You see that there's a 500 error, but you don't actually know what the posts or the verbs or what the communication
Actually,
or
yes.
the content pieces were.
Yeah, well, actually, you can. The Chrome toolbox is pretty.
I know, I use it all day.
Yeah. You
But
can
tell me in
dive
this
deep
case,
into these things.
yeah, in case of this stuff, Fiddler was more useful. Also, this was coming from a back end job,
Yeah.
so where there was no web browser context in
Yeah.
place, and Fiddler can communicate with anything that's coming out of your stack.
Yeah.
So, it's really useful. Hopefully, the Linux version is just as powerful.
I used it back like in 2007, 2008 for doing Adobe Flash uploads. Something was going wrong with it, and I used Fiddler to debug the thing. That was great.
Yeah. It's a wonderful tool.
Yeah.
And
when it was still on Windows.
Well, it's now on Linux.
Okay.
Which means I guess you could load it up on a Mac too.
Yeah.
Have to be. Yeah.
So Unbox Therapy had a cool video.
Is this about the no phone?
That was amazing. He has like an existential moment, like
yeah.
What is life?
So what's the link on this?
Polymatic.link/1T.
1T.
Let's not spoil it. Just watch it. It's so fucking
okay. You don't want to spoil it. Yeah. Okay. It's keep in mind he's
loud.
He goes on for a while before he gets to the product. But I mean, you could see it sitting there, and you go, "Oh, okay, that's some of the good, some good humor." I definitely did buy a bunch of those, especially the Air version.
The no phone
for
Air.
many people.
Like put it as a gift.
Yes, exactly. I didn't look up the prices on those things though. Okay, so walking down sort of in development world, this is a site that I don't really check, but I reminded every once in a while when I work with less experienced developers at work, and usually I'm in some kind of leadership or mentor path to kind of help. And, you know, I had a case where someone that that was working on our team for a little bit really was afraid of JavaScript and never touched it. And this isn't a site I sent him, but there's a site here, Polymatic.link/1U. It's just a good blog if you just want to learn little tricks and tips about JavaScript. It's pretty good. Most of these things are pretty common, and you know, if you come from more formal programming and then you also do JavaScript, this is probably not going to add tremendous value to you. But again, Polymatic.link/1U. And if you do JavaScript all day and night, and I don't mean like jQuery JavaScript or you know, like if you're doing raw JavaScript or you want to learn more about it, it can't hurt to kind of peruse a blog like this that puts up little tips and tricks every once in a while.
Okay, so we got another video. Casey Neistat, What You Don't See. There is a video by Nerdwriter, and it's about the format of Casey Neistat's videos, of his daily vlog, and how he does things, and what you don't really see, right? But also what you do see. It's an interesting video. I kind of liked how he described how everything works, and it's like at first you think the title is like, oh, it's something he doesn't show and it's really bad or something, but it's an actual good video about how, you know, about his way of doing things. And even though it looks kind of vloggy, it's usually more production value than is in an average TV series.
That is true. So like Casey comes back from a background of so he doesn't come from formal filmmaking. He just kind of did some filmmaking, like home video filmmaking stuff, and then was hired by larger companies and for like advertisement and viral video creation. And he thinks more like a filmmaker than he thinks like a vlogger. And so like one of the things early days of YouTube and even like current YouTube, who people just like, you know, grab a webcam and it looks horrible, but they're a pretty person that's going to get eyes on it, or they play music or they sing, or, you know, they have some kind of
gimmick,
desirable asset that people identify with or want. and that gets some eyes. And so most YouTube editors are the worst editors ever. You would never professionally ask them to do something for CNN or HBO. You wouldn't hire them for that because they're not that skilled. And that's where jump cuts became a thing that like Woody Allen did intentionally, was like just crappy editing by people, and it became acceptable. And so Casey not only has some understanding and the gear from his personal professional experience, he was able to just cobble together stuff, and he thinks more like a filmmaker, where he goes out of his way to get the shot of him running by or doing a thing. And he will go out of his way to do that, set those shots up, and that might take him 20 minutes to do that, and then he has the shot, and then he goes on, and then you see him having a conversation about it. And so he, what looks like all of a solid 9 minutes probably was parts of his day, but he's always setting up shots everywhere he went. And so he's treating his life like filmmaking instead of just living his life with a camera on. And so he goes out of his way to make great stuff. And so Nerdwriter is one of those video essay sites that I watch also, that I like. Every once in a while, the guy's got something really, really, thoughtful and interesting.
Yeah. So you can find that video at polymatic.link/25.
Okay, cool. So moving on to production. I mean, there's a company called LensPro, I think .com might be their website, but they have this thing where they have something called IOTA, which is it's okay to ask, and they did a video on recording time calculator, and this is basically talking about sort of, I guess, coordinating, like, depending on what kind of video you're going to film and what kind of bit rates you're going to have, what kind of file sizes can you expect, and how much will my 64 gig card hold, right? And whether you do this with an expensive DSLR camera or something like a Red Dragon, or something all the way down to your simple little point and shoot $1,000 RX100 Mark V from Sony. They kind of take you through, depending on their settings, what kind of amount of time you're going to expect, how long it will take, what kind of file sizes. So they kind of talk about, recording time and sort of what the calculations should look like. So if you're interested in that at all, or you're actually in doing video production or YouTube, and this is something of interest, and that's it. That's what I would recommend you do, is go check that out. Again, I'll give you the link, polymatic.link/1W.
Okay, so Scott Manley is a YouTuber who does a lot of Kerbal Space Program, and now he's doing Elite Dangerous. So
I gotta check out this guy's site.
Well, I've linked him before, but Elite Dangerous is a game, a space sim game, and recently somebody noticed like a way to get aliens to scan you and go, all weird. So he did the same thing, and there's a video of that, and it's polymatic.link/21. It's the first time that aliens show up in the game, and this is kind of special because nobody actually knew it was in there yet. So they were promising that, and they just put it in the background, and suddenly somebody noticed something, and they got scanned by aliens and had a close encounter. That was a very interesting thing. I have Elite Dangerous too, and I'm actually considering playing it now, because it's actually looks a lot more fun than just hopping around from station to station.
Okay, so I got one. So I found this video, I don't know, randomly, probably through last week or something, and it's basically titled, it's titled "Sums Up Motherhood in 34 Seconds." So whether you're a parent or not a parent, I think we could all identify with this, and it's polymatic.link1x.
I was watching this earlier today. It's very funny.
I shared that to someone, and people were laughing. And you be patient, wait for the end. Believe me, wait for it.
I've got a video of deadmau5 doing designing tracks. I find these types of videos very interesting. Just people working on their craft, right? So watching other artists stream, watching designers do their thing, it's soothing because you can just lean back and watch them do things. It also gets your creative things going, right? So
encourages you.
Yeah. So it's like seeing people do things.
Watching your Let's Play had the second thought last night. I was like, maybe I should go find where the mansion is. But I haven't come across it yet, and apparently it's really far away. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll get to it eventually.
Anyway, so deadmau5 designing tracks is on polymatic.link/22.
Okay, cool. So I came across this one video, and I just thought it was interesting. It's about like 19 minutes long, but basically this family, they basically built a greenhouse around their existing house.
Yeah.
And then they modified the house inside the greenhouse. And they were just talking about and they were sort of touring and discussing how the environmental stuff has changed. And mostly this house is kind of legitimately off-grid. And I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. And I thought, anyone who's kind of, it makes me think, man, if I ever build a house and I build a big greenhouse about it, I mean, the idea is kind of cool because, even when it's winter outside, you're still a lot warmer inside, and the kind of things that you build your house around that require wear are protected by this big, I don't want to say bubble, but this big greenhouse that's built around it. So I thought it was kind of interesting. And you guys are not interested in it and don't watch it, but you can check it out at polymatic.link/1y.
I thought it was a very interesting video.
Yeah,
especially the part about recycling their waste.
Yeah, I was a little like, I don't know if I go that far, but still, nonetheless, I thought the idea of them sort of encapsulating their house, and they didn't do it quickly. It cost them money, and it took them a long time to do it.
Yeah, having to scoop out your own poop that has been turned into dust kind of sounds...
I'm not sure that I would build a system like that, but I would definitely have the thought of encapsulating a house, if you could build your own house, and money was not a concern, and you build it with a greenhouse, and then you put the solar roof tiles from Tesla/Solar City, you could have a pretty nice house.
Actually, you could put it inside the glass, and you'd still get enough heat inside.
I suppose you could. You could glue them onto the greenhouse.
Well, there's
glass.
buildings with transparent solar panels in the windows.
Okay,
it's out there. You can do that. Anyway, it was a pretty interesting video.
Yeah, I mean, yes. When you get towards the end of it, I was more like a greenhouse house, and I'm like, well, that's not the title of the video. That's just what I called it. So I was like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Okay, so we got a video about the scroll lock button. I don't know if it's interesting to you, but I found it like a nice trip down memory lane, about terminals and stuff like that. It was.
Well, I mean, I have. Yeah. I mean, you can, at least on most laptops with like some kind of function key, you can hit a scroll lock.
Well, it's actually on several machines. It's still on there. The only ones that don't have it are Macs.
Yeah, that's more of a time from long ago. No.
Yeah, you can find the video at polymatic.link/23, and it's actually an interesting video, so just go check it out.
I'll have to check that out.
And then the last thing I put on the list is Trello is being acquired by Atlassian.
Yeah, I mean, Trello is a startup just like Slack, and they hit their 5-year, and they have to mature their profit margin for their investors. So if they're not there yet, usually, I've heard of people who start companies for financial arbitrage over actually doing a real thing. They sell you on, I'm doing a great thing. And then when they turn around and their company does a great thing, that just ups their value when they try to sell it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the founders of Trello, that was their intention. But I mean, if they believe this is a good thing, I hope it's a good thing. I hope Atlassian doesn't ruin what Trello has become.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to log in with my Atlassian ID, because it's a horror show. I hope they bring a lot of the technology from Trello into their other products like Jira and HipChat and other stuff. I think that Trello's things are very good at what they do, and their login stuff it works. I think that that Jira and other Atlassian products could learn something from this. I think
there is
it's good.
There is a TED Talk, and I want to say Daniel Pink is one of his videos, where they were talking about he was having some kind of talk where someone animated it. It was an RSA where basically someone animated his TED Talk, and I don't remember which one it was, but it was something where they were talking about like what encourages us or what makes us happy or something like that. And he mentioned this little snippet about Atlassian as a company, because they're an Australian company, right? And one of the things they would do is once a month, they have a full 24 hours that they gather up all their developers. I don't know if they still do this, where they gather up all their developers and they basically they pitch they get to team up with whoever they want in the company for 24 hours or 48 hours, and for that amount of time they get to build whatever product they want, and then they get to pitch it, and then if there's something good in there, it gets integrated in other products or it becomes its own product of its own. Where Google used to do the 20%, and that's where we got our Gmail, right? That's where we got our Google Plus. Not that that's a popular thing, but Gmail is, right? So, if Google never did that, allowed people to have some freedom of thought, we wouldn't have gotten better products from them.
Yeah, well, Atlassian, their productivity suite for development stuff is pretty good. It's Java based mostly, so it's not the best, and it's usually more cloud oriented these days, but you can still buy it for your own servers, and I think that's a good thing. So if they would have Trello but have it like inside your own company, I would totally go for that, because Trello is awesome for your projects and stuff.
My only slowdown is getting people in where I work in the company to be hip enough to accept it. They're like, yeah, but I can just email you. I can just create more noise the way I'm happy to do. Yeah. No one wants to evolve their behaviors, right? They don't see the value. I don't see the value in that. Like I immediately get shut down, so I don't bother.
Anyway, the article about Trello is actually a blog on their website. You can find it at polymatic.link/24.
Okay, cool.
So I guess that's it for this week. Alan, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Chase, CHAESS. How do you spell my last name?
And they can find me at twitter.com/webdevie, WEBDEVVIE. For feedback, you can reach us at podcast@Polymatic.media. Our Twitter is the Polymatic. Our website is Polymatic.media. And I hope you tune in next time. The music in this episode was by Say Uns. It was licensed under Creative Commons Attribution and found on the Free Music Archive. You can find these tracks at shortner.com/PRK.